Welcome to episode 5 of Huddle Up with Matias Bueno here. We have 2007 Vanier Cup champion and defensive coordinator and assistant head coach of the Manitoba Bisons, Stan Pierre. Thanks for coming on to Huddle Up, Coach.
Oh, my pleasure. Great to be here.
So let's get to the first things first. So you guys have had your season canceled officially as of about a month ago or so. What was the mindset in the locker room of what you guys were thinking as to if it was going to happen and as to how you guys are deciding to handle what you're going to do with the program going forward into the season, considering there's going to be no games?
Yeah, I mean, kind of the first part of your question, we certainly anticipated that this was going to be the end result of what's going on. Obviously, we're in a global health crisis, so as much as we live our lives and we find them very important, some things are obviously more important than that. So our focus went quickly to basically how this is going to affect our players. Not only just the fact that they're not going to be able to play, there's a lot of logistical and emotional things that come with that. So, our main attention started to go to, well, what is our team going to look like next year? How are we going to handle the new class? How are we going to handle 2 years of a new class? Are players going to get their eligibility back? We probably think that it's fair that they do. How are they going to handle the age rule, which is unique to our sport? So internally, there were all those questions that we needed to start dealing with and planning for. Also knowing that, we live in a scholarship world with fixed resources, both in terms of how much money we have and how much money we're allowed to give out. And as we add more players to that pie, it starts to become a bit, I don't want to say concerning, but definitely it's going to be challenging moving forward, that's for sure.
So you guys talk about the age rule and about the eligibility logistics. I understand that there were players this year who were in my age demographic that were turning 24, and the rule for football is unless your birthday is September 1st, that's a cutoff, that 24 is the oldest you could be going into a season, with the exception of the 25-year-olds who have late birthdays. So right. Have there been talks with the league that you're aware about in terms of how they're going to pass a motion to give an exception to those 24-year-olds? And will they be the only group of people who are given the exception, or will it apply to every single person who was active last year that they're given the next year? How do they distribute that fairly?
All great questions. We haven't received word of that yet. I anticipate that's coming in the next couple of weeks. I really don't know how it's going to go down because these things almost inherently turn political, and people start determining what's better for their programs or their conferences, as opposed to, one man's opinion. I find it, I don't know what's fair about taking kids' eligibilities away when this is something that they had absolutely no control over.
So do you feel that it would be appropriate in your eyes then to give every single person an extra boost year and be able to play to 25? Or do you think that only the players who are in their last year will be given it, or should be given next year? Or how do you see that it would be the fairest way for all programs across the country?
I think everybody who's in the system, if they want to finish out what their year of eligibilities were, that they should be allowed to. I think this year should just be considered like it wasn't here, and we should just move on and let the programs deal with the problems. I mean, I know there's going to be problems with all these other people coming into the program, but it's not an easy answer. But in fairness, I just don't know why we wouldn't do that.
So now, related to some of the players who are CFL draft hopefuls, and with the draft still having happened, the situation with the CFL has been really, really foggy. Do you think that there will be a bigger effect on the university players who have been selected in terms of the CFL, because now their season is canceled, but the CFL season might happen, may not? How do you think that whole ordeal will shake down depending on if the CFL season happens or not for the university drafted players?
Well, I mean, for the players that are drafted, I mean, other than not playing for the year, it doesn't really make a difference. to them, they're still going to be property of those teams. And, but I think what the interesting aspect is going to be, same with us, they're going to have an extra class coming in. And then are they going to allow deferrals? Um, we used to live in a world where the CFL had deferrals for players, so they could defer. If their draft year came up but they weren't ready, they could defer. That was all taken away, which is fine. It's their rule, it's their league. But I think it's going to be really difficult for them. If there's a kid who was a backup for 2 years, like let's say the next defensive end coming out of Manitoba is draft eligible this year, but he was playing behind Brock Gallenlock and Derek Dufault. Well, that kid may be a pro player, but the pros may not have very much film on him because those two guys were really good. So, it's going to be difficult for them to figure out what's going on with those players if they haven't seen a lot of them. I mean, the stars, people know who the stars are. That's not an issue, but this is, for lack of a better term, a development league. These are these kids' development years, and a lot can change in a year for an 18 to 21-year-old.
So do you think that it is, in terms of the CFL situation, that it would be in their best interest to go forward with trying to at least salvage the season, considering the financial implications on many of the franchises that aren't publicly owned? Or do you think that is better to shut it down and that they won't fold if they don't play this year?
Well, I think that's asking the wrong question. I mean, is it safe for them to play? Is it safe for players from Texas, Florida, Georgia to be coming into Canada? It doesn't take much for a super highly contagious virus that can spread, and it becomes exponential spread, and then you have an outbreak. So, I mean, to me, if it's safe, then have at her by all means. If it's not safe, then don't. The financial viability of the league, I don't know where they stand financially, so I can't make that determination. Should I say they should play at all costs, to survive? Well, no, I don't. I don't think it'll come to that. I mean, they're an industry just like every other industry in Canada, and I'm sure if it came to that, well, certainly I'm a taxpayer, and I would supporting the CFL, just the same way I would supporting the fine arts. And I don't go to watch the ballet or the opera or any of those things, but I think it's important that people have those things in our country. And I think that if they need support, I think it's better to have them than not to have them. So as a taxpayer, those are things that I'm willing to pay for. So, I just think the question is a matter of safety. If it's safe, then yes. If not, then no.
So with regards to safety, I know that there's been disputes about the benefits for American players, considering they pay Canadian taxes and are now living in a second country. Would it be possible, or do you think it'd be feasible for the CFL, if they deemed it was safe, to play with only Canadian players compared to allowing the Americans in? Or do you think that would be totally unrealistic in terms of the number of players that come from the US?
I think that's fairly unrealistic. I don't think the CFL. Okay, I mean, look, this is one man's opinion. I mean, I'm not in the CFL offices, but I see the CFL, moving to this 2.0, and they seem to be trying to get players from all over the world. Are they getting those players to replace the Americans? I don't think so. So what's the point of them getting those players? So I think that they don't think there's enough Canadian players as there is with the ratio as it stands. So I don't see that as an option for their league. I don't think they find that they would find that an attractive option. I mean, you might as well just be USports at that point.
Do you think that there is a bigger pool of talent to choose from in USports for players to make it to the CFL, or what do you think? Do you really think that the global 2.0 movement for the CFL is about replacing the lack of Canadian players, or do you think that they're just?
Well, I don't think that's the only reason. I think that the commissioner stated that they're looking for new markets and new revenue streams, which that's we can have the argument of whether you think that people in Italy are going to watch the CFL, but you know, 15 years ago, you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who knew or watched the Premier League in Canada, you know, and that's certainly taken off since then. So who knows, you know, I just think if everything was fine, you don't see, well, I mean, it's such a unique league with the ratio, you know, like other professional leagues, it doesn't matter what their nationality is. It's just they get the players in, you know, and is there going to be great athletes all over the world? Absolutely. There has to be.
And I know that when doing a bit of research in CFL history, they had the American expansion in the 90s that came and went just like that, and it blew through the wind. With that experience of them having expanded into the US, do you think that that's something that may be back on the horizon due to
No,
their desire to expand, or no?
no, that was stupid. You know, I honestly, well, maybe it wasn't stupid. I mean, I think the league was so desperate for money that they just brought those franchises in, took whatever money that they gave them, you know, and had this ridiculous league where American teams were playing with American players and Canadian teams were playing with a ratio, and you know, what interest did the American teams in Las Vegas or Shreveport have in the CFL? None. That was, you know, I'm obviously quite a bit older than you. I mean, I was deeply into the CFL at that time of my life. I was old enough to make economic decisions, let's say, and that turned me off of the league, to be honest, at that point.
And around that time, I know that people talk about how financially desperate the league was, and I think that it kind of maybe has a bit of a similar connotation to what the league is going through now. I know that it seems kind of shady because they talked about how people were saying that the league may fold if they don't play this year because Toronto and all these other teams that are privately owned, they lose so much money every year, except for like Winnipeg and Saskatchewan and Edmonton. But is it really possible for the league to fold if they didn't play this year?
Well, I don't know. Again, one man's opinion. I'm skeptical at those types of, you know, if they don't want to fold, then they can just shut down operations and stop paying everybody, you know, and then they will be in hiatus until, you know, this is over, and then they could restart operations. You know, obviously there's going to be some expense that comes with that they probably would need some government assistance to work their way through. But I mean, you have to understand, you know, this is a time where, you know, industries and people are all going to the government for help. And, you know, I don't think you go to the government for help and say, hey, we're doing great, but could you please give us a few $1 million? You know, you go and you say, look, we're in trouble, we need some help. And I think, you know, you'd be more likely to get some help in those circumstances. So I'm not sure that that's a thing or not, but what do I know? I'm you know, I'm just one man with one opinion.
So you've been coaching with the Bisons for several years now. You played with the Bisons as well back before you started coaching with them?
Yep.
What years did you play with the Bisons, and what was your experience like playing with the program, and how do you contrast it to your experience now as being a part of the coaching staff?
Okay, well, I came in 89, I think, to 93, something like that. 88 to 90, something like that. But you know, when I came in, it was actually the last years of Danny Hersyko, so it was kind of the dark times. When I actually came in, though, we had a really talented team, but our starting quarterback got hurt in the first game, so that ended our season basically. And then Denny stepped down or got let go, however you want to name it. And then we had a new coach come in named Scott Spurgeon, who turned the program around, made us a national contender. You know, we were ranked as high as 2 in the country, lost in a Can West final here. But he had a bunch of violations and he got fired. So then when I finished, Ron Jr. was the coach, RD Jr., Ron Lancaster Jr. And we were kind of meh. But that said, um, my experience was obviously amazing. I mean, um, there's a lot worse things you can be doing as a university kid than playing on the football team. It's quite fun. Yeah.
So you said Ron Lancaster Jr. was your coach toward the latter
Yeah.
years of your time with the Bisons.
Yeah. My last year. Yeah, that's correct.
So obviously Ron Lancaster Sr., CFL Hall of Famer, legendary player. What was the feeling like with having like a close relative, I guess a descendant of a great CFL player, be a head coach at the U of M? Was it a special feeling when the news came out, or was it different because Ron Lancaster, he had coached in the CFL as well afterwards, right? And that around that time, wasn't he coaching?
Yeah, sure. You know, I don't put much stock in those things, like, oh, he coached in the CFL. Well, what does that really mean? Not every coach in the CFL is great, and not every coach in college is a bum. There are some unbelievably smart and good and tough opponents that I face in the Canada West every week. There are excellent coaches, and you know, um, like coaching is a matter of experience for sure, and there's something about that in terms of perhaps like some of the American guys who, and I'm not here to criticize American coaches, obviously there's a lot of very great coaches, but not all of them for the reason that they just grew up in America. They certainly have an advantage in terms of their infrastructure coming up, that's for sure. But what makes them smarter than the smartest Canadian guys? I don't know why they would be. So, when that happened, I was a strong proponent. I was very loyal to Scott, and I wasn't all that enthralled about a new coach coming in, to be honest. I actually stepped back for a year when that happened. I was disillusioned with the program and with what had happened, but then I decided, no, I want to play my last year, and I came back to play my last year for him.
So would you say then that Scott was probably the coach that had the most profound impact on you during your time with the Bisons?
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
What was his coaching history? Had he been a coach for a long time at that point, or what was?
Yeah, he was a coach out east. He had coached. He coached in U Sports. He coached in the CFL. Um, he he was a really excellent football coach. He lived football. He lived in the office. I mean, don't get me wrong. He had some things about him too, as every human being does. But you know, he knew his stuff, and it was really a paradigm shift for football in Manitoba. It took us out of the dark ages and modernized us just like that. And he brought a professionalism and teaching us how to prepare. And I can't tell you how many coaches came out of his tree from his time at Manitoba, and I mean top coaches in the province. It was his impact was everlasting. I have to say.
So with you refer to the dark ages of football in Manitoba. Can you talk a little bit about that stretch and what really entailed it being hailed as the dark ages for football in the province?
Well, I didn't say football Manitoba. I said the
The
Bison program
program.
itself.
Oh,
Like
yes,
the junior programs were really strong in Manitoba at that time. Um, just the program was losing, and it was continually losing. So, yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't a great time. Um, the program had a couple of good years in the 80s before I got there, but other than that, they had done really nothing of note.
So now so what years did you start getting into coaching with the Bisons after you were done playing? Were you a guy that during your time were you looking towards aiming to being in the CFL, or were you more oriented towards coaching after you were done playing and you knew it long before your career was done with the Bisons in the mid 90s?
That's a good question. I mean, Um, so I was relatively young for a player at that time. So, you know, um, my draft year, I think I was 20 or something like that. I went to the combine. Um, I, I did okay, but not great. But I didn't get drafted. So I was, at that point, I was, I don't know. I was feeling the effects of playing the game for sure. I was getting physically a little bit like I don't know how I could go another 6, 7, 8 years of this. Anyways, so I was, you know, it wasn't something when I was a kid. I thought it would be, you know, no matter what. But when I was in college, it wasn't that. It wasn't. It was kind of like, well, if it happens, you know, it might be, you know, a nice thing to say that I played in the CFL. But you know, people who think like that aren't going to become professional players. I just wasn't driven in that way as a player once I got to that age. That doesn't mean I thought about coaching. I didn't. I just was, you know, I was a commerce grad who was going to partner with one of my buddies, and we got into business and we started rolling. And then a guy that I had played with, Mike Watson, he was a teacher and he became the head coach at Sturgeon. So he asked me if I wanted to coach with him, and then it just went from there. It just took off. So you know, it was the thing that I was missing. I loved playing. I did, but I didn't miss playing once I started coaching. Let's put it that way. It just changed my focus. Um, I was in the game still in a different way and a different challenge, and I was good, and off I went basically.
So you mentioned Mike Watson. Was he a teammate of yours for all the years that you played at the Manitoba Bisons?
Not all, but a good chunk for sure. He was a bit older than me. He was a Bison. He left. Again, he was in the dark ages. He left. He went and played junior, and then came back when Scott got hired. So I didn't know Mike until we started playing, but we became very close when we played. So yeah, we were really good friends.
And so what was the gap between when you stopped playing and when you started coaching at Sturgeon?
Oh, right away.
Right away, like the next year you
Yeah.
were at Sturgeon.
Yeah.
And what were your like? Did you feel kind of hesitant to do it, or did you think it's nothing to lose, like might as well try this?
No, he asked me, and I said, okay, sure, that sounds like fun. You know, like I don't know. It's just one of those things, man. Somebody asked me, and I said, yeah, sure, I'd like to try that, and I did.
And what role did you jump into right away with Sturgeon? Were you in
I was a defensive coordinator.
as
Yeah,
a coordinator?
yeah.
And how did you find the dynamic of coaching high school football in comparison to maybe your years having played it in like previously?
Well, I played midget,
Or
so
oh,
you know
not
that was a different time. That was when the midget league was quite a bit bigger and stronger than the high school league. There was, you know, 8 high school teams or something in Manitoba at my age at that time. So I was a Fort Garry Lion. Uh, you know, something happens the minute you start coaching and your brain starts thinking the other way. And, you know, during my times coaching, I've actually tried to produce, you know, activities or stuff to get the players to start to think that way. I think a lot of times you're in this protective cocoon as a player, and you don't branch your thinking out, and you're, you know, it's a competitive environment, and you're really only thinking about yourself initially. You know, before you can become this great team guy, you need to be able to be playing. You know, that's how players think. They don't look at themselves as, well, I'm a second team player, so therefore I'm this big contributor to the team. Nobody thinks that way. It's again one of the challenges of coaching, to try to get people to understand that everybody plays a role. So once that happened, I immediately started thinking differently, and I had the responsibility of thinking for everybody else, and it just deepened my understanding for the game immediately. Almost that knowledge was there; it was taught to me, but I didn't think about it in those terms. It changes the way you think, just like college changes the way you think, or should. You know, if you have good professors who are doing the right things, it should teach the way you think. And yeah, so So it was night and day. My playing experience was nothing like my coaching experience.
So what specifically about the alternative way of thinking did you see change when you became a coach? Did you find yourself looking back and reflecting on your playing days and saying,
100%.
uh,
Said,
oh,
why
I
I
thought
didn't think
this
that
way?
way. I would have known so much more. I would have played so much better if I understood everything that was going on around me, to more of an understanding, more depth. Absolutely. It just, it just, I don't know why players don't think that way. So that's why I try to find different ways to get them to think that way, because I think it would make a difference in their play.
Or some of the things in particular that you found that really changed the way that you thought as a coach, or what moment when you were at Sturgeon really made things just click really well and say, hey, maybe if I got guys doing this drill or this scheme, then they would really understand their role better, or they would
Well, it
understand the.
wasn't so much that it was that, just because, I was a great fan of Scott and a great fan of his defense, but there's a lot of things about our defense that I hated. We blitzed all the time. That's not who I am. That's not my personality. That's not I didn't like it. There's always blitz and engage, blitz and engage. Well, I didn't want to blitz and engage. I wanted to see what was going on and be back there, type of thing. I didn't want to waste myself every play, in my opinion, kind of thing, just to mug up the back. So there were things that I didn't like, that I said, or we had this system, we were in this 50 system, and the inside linebacker, the side of flow, like people won't even know what I'm talking about. It was all two back stuff back then, but he would scrape to contain, and they could double the nose and chip the linebacker, and nobody would have the open A gap, or they would send the fullback through the A gap, and I was told to scrape to contain. Well, the fullback is creating a new gap. I thought it was stupid, but when I was a player, I was told to just shut up and do what I was told. Don't be a yabba guy. You know what I mean? That's one thing also that I hated as a player. I thought it was stupid. Don't be a yabba guy. I say, you know, I tell my players, you're the ones who have to do it. So if you don't like it, or you think you can't do it, then speak up and say it, because what am I going to do with my two bad hips, wheeling around the field? I can't stop anybody anymore. You need to do it. So yeah, there were lots of things like that where I said, oh, when I'm coaching, I'm not going to act like that. I think that's stupid. I didn't understand it.
So, so where did you think that that line of thinking originated from, in terms of once you got into coaching? Do you find that the problem solving and the analytics that you had from Commerce helped with the way that you saw the football field, or was it mainly based off the experience you had as a player and the way that you realized things weren't maybe as they should have been once you got to the coaching role?
All those things, but it's kind of who I am. Not everybody thinks the same as me. I know that. I accept that. I just know that as a fact. And for good or for bad, I am the way I am. And so, I would. I'm not capable of not being who I am, I guess, is the, and I think that the way that I think was conducive to having a collegial learning environment where kids could learn the game.
And so, how many years did you then stay at Sturgeon until you moved up to coaching with the Bisons? And what was your favorite memory that you had with your first coaching experience there?
Um, well, I mean, I don't want to denigrate the kids, because I didn't, the teachers did. But, we took that team to the semifinals, and we lost to St. Paul's in the semifinals. And the school, I mean, they wanted to have a parade, like, and the teachers were like, I can't believe what you're doing with these kids. And we're like, well, if this is a good kid, he's an idiot. This is a good kid, he's an idiot. It's like, so that was a really great experience, just because, the kids had a great experience. The school really got behind us and had and, you know, I think if I can take the teachers at their word, I think we got a little something out of the kids, which is also rewarding. So yeah, all those things it was all good. It was all good, but ironically, I ended up leaving Sturgeon to go to U of M because, it conflicted with my career more. So I was having trouble getting across town, because I was working in the South End. I was having trouble getting across town in time. And so my second or third year, I can't remember when I left Sturgeon, if I was there 2 or 3 years. I was missing practices because I just couldn't get out on time, and even stuff like, at 2:30 I would say I would be there, and then, come 3 o'clock I couldn't leave because something happened at my business, so we practiced later at U of M. It was closer, and at that time it actually fit better for me.
How long do you think you could have or would have stayed coaching with Sturgeon or in the high school system had things worked out logistically in terms of your schedule?
I could coach at any level forever, though. I don't coach because of the level that I'm at. Yeah, no, I've coached 9-year-old girls. I've coached, like I said, college men. It makes no difference to me.
So then you jumped into coaching at the University of Manitoba. Were you first with a defensive position group when you got there, or what was the
Yeah,
first?
I was the linebacker coach, and my current DB coach, Richard Banovich, was the defensive coordinator.
So you guys have I'm sure a strong relationship after many years of having coached together. How
100%.
how has the dynamic of your and his relationship been when considering you guys you were a coach under his jurisdiction, now he's a coach under your jurisdiction? How does that kind of work over?
Honestly, if there was anything that seemed weird, or um, you'd have to ask him. Honestly, I don't think there was anything. It just, he had stepped back for a year um, during that time, and I think that he was having trouble doing the work that needed to be um, done. As being a volunteer assistant is really hard. It's really hard. The hours are, it's really tough, and you have a job, and the hours that you need to give the kids what they need at that level, it's tough. So I think he was ready to kind of step away at the same time, but you'd have to ask him. I mean, it has never, and I mean never, um, affected our relationship at all. Our relationship has been great from day one.
So the first years that you started coaching with the Bisons, was the program still on an upward apex, or were they still
Terrible,
back a
terrible,
little better?
terrible, terrible, terrible. I remember thinking, we're never gonna win here. I remember having that feeling like we're never gonna win here, and Coach Joby was kind of lost. He was just he was just trying to to pour water out of the boat while the boat was filling with water, and he was treading water at best. And I think, you know what happened is, um, when Vaughn Mitchell and myself became coordinators, we were willing to sacrifice really everything to give the program what it needed. So that means everything. That means, at work, I was working on football. Um, Relationships, they went to the wayside. I just focused on football, and Vaughn did the same thing. And we were both young and both willing to do it, and not everybody is willing to do it, but we were. And to be honest, I think it was the catalyst, because we were able to take a lot of the operation stuff off of Coach Doby's plate, and he could move now more to the player personnel procurement side. Of course, he was still running the program. He was the only full-time employee, so there's all that stuff. But we took a bunch off his plate, and so now he could start focus on recruiting. We could start helping him with what players we wanted to be recruiting, because we were bringing all these guys in. This is a great guy. This is a great guy. They didn't work. They didn't work. So we started to become more sophisticated, I guess, in how we were able to do things, and then it started to turn around. And yeah, so then at that point, we started. There was a point, in the early 90s, where I thought, well, we're never going to be bad again. We're always going to be good now. Which, as you learn in sports, it's just impossible to stay on top. It's just impossible. It just, everything you do is a blueprint for somebody else to try to do it better. And it's, and then it's hard to change when you're doing well. And then all of a sudden you're the person who's being toppled and now you have to change. And, that's what I love about sports. There was a time, in the 90s where I said to Coach Joby, like, I don't think I can do this anymore. This is too boring, man. Like, the league was stagnant. The coaching was stagnant. It was easy to prepare every week. It was kind of a joke. And then all of a sudden it wasn't. And ever since then, it hasn't been. And it's been like super challenging, like crazy challenging. So yeah, that's what I love about sport, man. It's always changing. It's dynamic.
So what point do you think, or what specifically was it that really drove the league changing from a very simple, easy way to prepare, nothing was challenging, to challenging, complex, and everybody is now at each other's throats, and it's really hostile because you never know who's going to be good, and everything's really even now?
Well, that's what competition is supposed to do. That's the point of capitalism, and that's the point of competition. It's supposed to, if you don't compete, you die. So either you lie down and take it, or you find ways to adapt. And that's the human experience. So that's bound to happen. No matter what happens in sports, that is bound to happen. No matter how dominant a team is, the other teams are going to adapt and compete. And, there's, things are going to trickle down. They're going to have more access. It was so closed back then, film, we used to have to go to Air Canada Cargo and wait for the film. And, you come and there'd be a plane coming from Regina, and you go and they go, oh, it wasn't on this plane. You'd be like, oh my God. And you drive back home, and the Air Canada Cargo guys all had our numbers, and they would phone us, hey, the plane from Edmonton's in, your package is here. And we'd drive down to get the tape and start dubbing it, so it was really hard to get better if you were stuck in your own little world, so like Saskatchewan, every one of them ran the same frickin' offense, and they had done it for years, and they ran the same defense, and they had done it for years, and they were the top dogs, and then they weren't, and then their stuff became garbage, and then they adapted. It's just, that's the way it goes. Yeah. If you're winning Vanier Cups, why are you going to change? Like, it's hard to just change for change's sake. It's hard to.
So, and obviously, again, same with many other sports, that each era is dominated by different teams. And I know that U of S had a dominant run in the 90s, and then they weren't as dominant, and then they redominated and lost 3 Vaniers in the mid 2000s, and then they didn't win a bunch of playoff games. So I think we've talked about this a bit before with how hard it is to win. And like, what was there a specific moment or some event that happened that really injected this lifeblood back into the league, or what was it that you saw made the league shift to being more competitive and not as haphazard, for lack of a better term?
Well, I mean, I think, I think Laval played a really big part in that. Laval had a different model, privately funded, lots of money, lots of coaches. It really forced other programs to invest more, to be honest, so there was more change, there's more professional coaches, there's more money spent, basically, is what happened.
Was there still a lot of crossover with coaches that had been in the CFL and who had coached in university in those days, or is it different now?
You still see it trickling down. I mean, I'm not sure that the salaries in USports are at the level where, you're going to see a CFL guy come down and be a DB coach at a school, or, so yeah, so that's a little different. You'll see them come and become head coaches for a while and move on, or you might see older CFL guys who are kind of on their way out come back, and they just want to keep coaching. So it's not for the money. They're retired, basically, and that sort of stuff. Like Steve Barato came back and coached all those years at UBC. He was done with the CFL, basically, and this was kind of his last stop. He hasn't been anywhere else since, I don't think so. Well, Calgary and then UBC, but with no.
So the Bisons, I know when you started coaching there, you thought that there was never going to be a time where you guys would win again. And then when did the team start to go on an apex and really shoot into the stratosphere, because you guys were an unstoppable force in the 2001 season and in the early 2000s? So what really shifted the program around when you started coaching there?
Well, recruiting. I mean, we started getting. So Coach Doby, basically what he did is he took a look at around the leagues, and this is what's really interesting, actually, and this kind of answers the whole thing that you were talking about before, with how things change or how people are on top and how it's hard to stay on top. So when we were competing in Canada West at that time, there was guys that were 29, 30 years old in the Canada West. They would play 5 years junior, 5 years CIS. So you had guys, so Saskatoon had the Hilltops. So they had one of the best junior no, not one of, well, yeah, one of at that point, because the Rams were the other junior team. The Rams weren't in the equation yet. So the Rams were off winning national titles, but the Hilltops still very good. But a lot of the Rams who were done would end up playing, for Sask as well. So, so they would just cherry pick all the junior talent out of their province, which was top notch. And then they would play 5 more years of college. BC had the entire BC Junior League to pick from. And so those two teams were powerhouses. In Winnipeg, we had, I think at that point, the Hawk, like the league was dwindling though. It was eventually working its way. We used to have the Manitoba Junior Football League, and now there's a team of junior football in Manitoba, so it was on its way down. So Coach Doby said, okay, well, these are the kids that these guys are getting to win. I'm just going to go see if I can recruit those kids. And then he did. And then we started getting them. And we were the exotic ones. He started it all. All the national recruiting, he started it all. And he went out, and all of a sudden we were dominating BC. Dominating, So the Kelowna or the Okanagan Sun, we got, a dozen guys from the team that lost the national junior final. They came, and that group was the catalyst, and it all started with one guy, Rob Stewart. You ask Coach Doby about it, he'll tell you, we got Rob, who was a great player for us. And then all of a sudden, all these other guys started piling on, and that's how it happened. So they were complacent, and we went in their backyard and took all their players. And then at that point, we were just the best at national recruiting. We were the best. So that's how it happened. We got good players. That's how it happened.
So then I'm sure then, like we talked about before, once you guys started national recruiting and once the first punch was thrown, then everybody started doing it, and everybody probably started going all over the place to get players.
First, they had to get rid of the age rule. So then they got rid of they had to implement the age rule. So the first anti-Manitoba stone that was thrown was the age rule.
That was 2000.
No, whenever it was. So they said, no. We can't have these guys coming in at this age. This is crazy. Our 18-year-old kids are playing against these men. Oh, no. Meanwhile, our 18-year-olds were Scott Coe. And they were playing at 18. You know what I mean? Like, It was irrelevant. But whatever. That was their deal. And that was the first kind of blow. And then everybody started national recruiting. Well, the paradigm of trying to get a kid who's 17 years old to move across the country versus one that's 22 years old that may be already living on his own is entirely different. And that's how that landscape essentially changed.
And do you feel that what would be the next step in the evolution of or changing the way that teams recruit and how teams can assert dominance again? Because now or I guess within the last decade or so, Calgary was seen as the big team in the Canada West.
Yep.
And UBC were they were struggling for a long time before they were rejuvenated. So
yeah.
So what was the next power shift that happened after? Because you guys won the 07 Vanier Cup, and then the age rules implemented shortly after, and then everything was flat land again. So then how did who was the next team that really implemented a change that revolutionized the way that U Sports was played, or has that not happened yet?
I don't know if there was a change. I mean, look, there's a dynamic in U Sports where you could look at how and Coach W was at basically a forum, where they were trying to get to the bottom of trying to improve U Sports football, and you could tell who were the best teams in Canada simply by their budgets. So there's a huge disparity in terms of large market and small market teams. So some sort of push to equalize the cost for student athletes to make their transit easier would be what I anticipate would be the next step. But I don't know, man. I don't know if we'll ever be ready for that in Canada or ever. It's just not the same as it is in the States. It doesn't generate the revenue that it does in the States.
And I guess it has to do with a grassroots thing. I know that college football was way larger in the U.S. for way longer, and at points in time was bigger than pro. And in Canada, like there's never been a big push and injection of following and attention in college sports in Canada. Has there been?
In sports in general in Canada, I mean, if you go to watch a University of Manitoba Bison hockey game, and they're playing University of Alberta, you're going to see the ice littered with WHL players. You know what I mean? It's going to be top-notch hockey. But people aren't, I don't know. People in Canada are apathetic to those sort of things. It's just the culture that we are. You have to take the good with the bad. We're apathetic to things like that. But, do you want to be living in the United States right now cheering for Alabama when you can't breathe in without getting the coronavirus? Well, those things are all cultural. And you just have to take the good with the bad.
So with your experience with the Bisons, I know you guys, for those who may not know out there listening or watching, that the 2001 team was one of the teams that was one of the main teams you guys believe could have or should have won. As Coach Joby had said to our class before, that there was 6 different teams that could have, should have, would have won the Vanier Cup. And how do you, what is your take on the way in which you approached going to win the Vanier Cup, and what the difference was with the teams that were the team that ended up winning for you guys and the team or the teams that didn't?
Well, I mean, it's tough because, I mean, honestly, I'll talk personally. Okay. In 2001, I was a shell of what I was, of what I am now as a coach. I mean, I was a talented young coach is what I was. But, I certainly didn't do a good enough job in that game for sure. I would 100% admit that. So, to say we should have won in 2001, I mean, we had a really good team in 2001. That St. Mary's team played great. They made all the plays. I remember we scored in the first half to go ahead, and it was a hard drive. I mean, we had to complete balls and windows, and we had to be perfect. And I thought to myself, I remember saying to myself, this is too hard. This is way harder than it has been. This is too hard. It's, I don't think we can sustain this. And then they made some plays, like, you can see if you can find Dave Stala's catch over the middle in the 2001 Vanier Cup. It's crazy.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Kyle Morrison made a play on orbit. I'll never forget. We picked off and intercepted a swing pass to the running back. We just, as a program, I don't think we were ready. I remember Coach Dobie telling a story about how he was at Vanier Cup, and the 2 teams were there, and one of the teams had a bunch of all-Canadians, and they were celebrating and going crazy, and the other team was just stoic and business-like or whatever. And he said to himself, well, that team's going to win. Well, we did the exact same thing in 01. We acted like idiots, and we just weren't ready. We weren't ready. Our preparation was horseshit.
And now when you compare it to the 2007 team, do you feel that you guys were more battle tested and a lot more professional about the approach, or how did the mindset change in between those years in 2001 and 7? I know that Coach Dobie talked about as well with our class before that. The 2006 team, again, could be argued that that was a group of guys that probably could have and should have won the Vanier and were also seen as an unstoppable force before the abrupt loss in the Canada West final.
Yeah, well, we got killed in the Canada West final, so I don't know where you know, uh, ability, talent, and ability, and like there were a lot of things about our teams that I didn't like at that time, and I think we did change our approach and we're more professional, and um, you know we're a little less laissez-faire than we had been. Uh, I think I think we needed to rein them in a little bit. I think they had, typically our teams have been, you know, uh, I don't want to say wild, but unfettered. Um, and that was just kind of the way that they were built, and part of our allure, I guess. And we are always compared to the Oakland Raiders or whatever, but we kind of were the Oakland Raiders. We kind of were a really good team that never could get over the hump. Like those great Raider teams, yeah, they ended up winning, but they lost a lot of really close games. And getting 15-yard penalties. So back then, people weren't sophisticated enough to understand it, but getting 15-yard penalties are almost a guarantee to make a team score points on you. It's analytically, it's ridiculous. So of course we lost. We were off the rails at times. So I think the 07 team, we finally reined them in enough that we did the right things most of the times. But
And so
again, we were lucky too. I mean, you need that to win. I can't understand why we scored, 30 points every third quarter. Sometimes a lot of things went our way. We blew out Western, in the Western semifinal. They were a good team. I can't tell you why we blocked a punt or we intercepted a ball they were driving. They were on our 5-yard line and got a pick six. Like we made the plays, but those things go the other way. Who knows? Winning, and that's back to your point. Winning is hard. Losing is easy. Winning is hard.
So when you look forward to the future now, in terms of just the general philosophy, maybe aside from the coronavirus effect for this current season, how do you guys approach each new year going forward, with obviously having a different group of guys, or what the mindset is in terms of how you guys want to be able to compete? Or are there years where that competing is a lot more challenging than others, and so you're not settling for second best, but
No.
where you stand?
Listen, this is a program, and our program, so we're in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and there's a lot of good football players that come out of Manitoba, but we're 3% of the population, so it's hard to build a football program when that's your main catchment. So we used to supplement that by recruiting outside the province. Well, that has become so competitive that we're not going to get a class where we're going to get 12 players from a national champion team anymore. So our, we're gonna do this with our program. We're gonna have to reload from time to time and build our programs back up, and that's just the way it is here. If we had a bigger catchment, with more, like the situation at Calgary. I'm not taking anything away from what they've done. They've done a great job, but that's very fertile ground in Southern Alberta, very fertile ground, and there's a lot of great football players that come from that province. And there's a lot of great football players, and I'll take the best football players in Manitoba versus the best football players anywhere. There's just not, 75 of them, coming out every year. So we have to build, and that's what we do. Um, I think cautious optimism in every season is good, but there may be different victories than just, going 7-1. You just got to build and get better and those sort of stuff.
So when you look, and during a time like now with the coronavirus, have there been moments of reflection for yourself in terms of you looking back on, or do you do this every year in terms of looking back on your coaching career, or looking back on the previous year with what worked, what didn't, and how you try to improve
Well,
the
yeah,
craft that
I
you
mean,
have?
in terms of my career, I mean, I don't look back and reminisce about things. I mean, well, we go out for beers enough that we reminisce about the old days from time to time. That's not really. But in terms of getting better, absolutely. This is no different than any other time. The only main thing that I've had this year that I haven't liked is we've lost spring football, which is time that I like to implement stuff. But it feels like we're going to get it back because we've been allowed to increase the amount of players we have on the field. So if we can actually get on the fields ourselves on campus, then we're going to be able to do some practicing at least until the fall, and then we'll see what happens, with second wave. So I anticipate we'll be able to do some of that experimenting and stuff. But yeah, in terms of getting better, and the one thing that's been great about this is, holy moly, you could watch as many clinics as you want. People are putting stuff online and having virtual clinics, and so that's been great, and great to jog ideas and that sort of stuff. So that never changes. Get better or die. Adapt or die.
And with the Bisons, in terms of when you look forward in the future for your career, before you got into coaching with the Bisons, was this something that you just took year by year and you're like, I'm going to go for as long as I feel, or were there timelines that you ever set for yourself as a coach that said, okay, I want to coach here for X number of years and figure out where I want to go from there? Or have you ever thought about coaching at the professional level in the CFL, or has that time passed?
To answer your last question, no, I've never felt the need to coach in the CFL. I'm perfectly happy where I am. It's weird. Time just flies, and then all of a sudden it's like you're a professional coach. But I don't know that I've ever felt like a professional coach because I just didn't come from coaching. Don't get me wrong, I attacked it like I was a professional coach, but I was doing that as an amateur for sure. But when I remember doing an interview on CJOB in 2001, and it was actually me and Vaughn. We did this big interview with CJOB on prime time. We were on for 15, 20 minutes. It was a long interview, and we were talking about, what we went through and the things that we do. And, I said to him, I think it was Jarrett Reed at the time. I was like, I'm not going to be able to do this for forever. It's too much. And really I was hoping we were going to get it done so I could take a step back, because I wasn't full time at that point. You know what I mean? So that's where I was. And we didn't. So then I was in this conundrum of, we didn't get it done. So then 2002, we were going to have a great team. And then we lost much the same way we lost in 2006, to be honest, to Saskatchewan at home in the Canwest final. I think we're 8-0, or 9-0 or whatever. And, and then at that point I was kind of disillusioned, I guess, because I thought, well, I don't know how we're going to get a team as good as this again. But then, Vaughn actually convinced me, and he's like, we don't need a team as good as this one. We just need a team that's the best. And he says, everything is relative. That team would have beat so many teams in the history of CIS sports. That St. Mary's team just happened to be that good. Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah, that made sense. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go through this. And then it started to seem like it may be a possibility that a new coach, that they would hire another coach at U of M. So, which was either brilliant by them and were able to rope me in for a little longer, or it was the truth, but I do remember, it's interesting. I'll tell this story. I think it's long enough past that it's okay that I can tell. I can't remember what year it was, but it was in that time somewhere, after 2001, but a little bit before the 2007 run, which would be 5, 6, 7, those teams. Um, Coach Joby got offered the UBC job. And they went after him hard, like that David Sadu, the guy who got busted in the Aunt Becky scandal. He was making a good offer, and we were going to go. I was going to go. We didn't want to go. We just didn't. But we had been asking for facilities. We've been asking for another coach, something. Like it was just unsustainable. So so I said, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to leak this. And he said, okay. I said, no, I'm going to leak this and let's see what happens. So I actually did. I called Ashley Prest and I said to her, I said, listen, I have a story for you. She was on mat leave. She's like, well, I'll give it to whoever the other guy was. I said, no, she had covered our team for many years. We trusted her. She was great. And,
Was she like a local Winnipeg journalist?
yeah, Winnipeg Free Press. And so I said, no, I need to give this to you. So we got the story out, and then Brian went in, and they promised him that not this minute, but they're going to work on it. A new coach is coming, and he got a raise, and yeah, and then however long later it was, a new coach came, and it was obviously going to be me. Well, I guess not obvious. I mean, but between me and Brian, it was going to be me, and off we went. So then I was in there. There was nothing. I was in. There's no leaving at that point. I was in.
And so I guess talking with the journalist was, so then she posted a story saying that you guys, or that UBC was looking to hire you guys to go to Vancouver to be a part of their program. And that's what made the Bisons basically sweeten the pot. Is that what?
Essentially, yeah.
And at the time, was it that
you have to have context of where the program was at that time to what, in their opinion. Yeah, they didn't even know who I was. It didn't even really matter. I mean, the inner workings of the athletic department knew, but the school president didn't know. But you look at what Brian had done with the program at that point, took it from the abyss, and I don't know if they're going to value the program and have it, and if you're not going to reward that, then why have it? So they came through and to be honest, we need a refresher on that type of stuff. But they at that time they came through and that's how it happened.
Do you think that there'll ever be an addition of another full-time coach, or is that one of your hopes?
There has to be. I mean, I don't know when or where, but again, we're competing against teams with 6, 7, 8 full-time coaches. When I came on full-time, in 06, it was enough. We had enough of a window to get it done. But now, it's just hard. Like, here we are this many years later, and Vaughn is in the same position, and just grinding, it's so hard, so now we have to try to hire, younger guys who are willing to take some of the workload and stuff. And it's I don't know. I mean, if you're going to value the program, and you look at the Canada West and you look at your competitors, don't make us first, make us the middle, fund us like the middle team in Canada West, yeah. So I think something has to change. I don't see how it doesn't.
Would you say that, I guess, from the logistics that the Bisons are on the lower end in terms of funding from a university, or the higher end or middle of the pack in comparison to the others in Canada West, or everyone's minus a few teams?
No, well, I don't know. We're not on the high end. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what I should say or not say, but we're not on the high end.
So just before we wrap up here, I was just gonna do a quick firing round where you ask questions.
Oh, sure.
With quick answers, and then we'll wrap up, and that'll be today's episode. So first question I want to ask was, who's your favorite CFL player growing up as a kid when you were watching football?
It was probably Jimmy Edwards of the Hamilton Tiger Cats. I was a Hamilton Tiger Cat fan growing up.
And what made you a Hamilton Tiger Cat fan growing up?
Who knows? I got a Hamilton helmet at Dairy Queen when I was like 2 years old. That probably was what sealed the deal.
What is your favorite memory watching a football game, not as a part of a coaching staff or as a player?
Honestly, I can't think of one that stands out. Okay, just for context, nothing was like winning the Vandy Cup in my life. Nothing. There was nothing better. People say I have a daughter. People say having the birth of your child would be the same. It's not. The birth of your child comes with unbelievable fear and anxiety. There's a lot of things that you're worried about the minute that child shows up. Yes, there's excitement too, and but the amount of unfettered joy that I had and relief was unmatched. Otherwise I just enjoy football. I can't think of, coaching for me killed coaching and gambling actually killed the kind of passionate fandom that some people might have for teams and stuff like that. I don't have that. I just like watching football, but I don't particularly root for anybody. Like I was super happy for the Bombers, but it wasn't like with the friends, like my friends I was watching the games with, I was like, guys, you need to relax. This game is over. They're going to win, but they were so nervous. So yeah. So I don't really have that for games, but I do love it.
So what would you say is your favorite thing to do to relax outside of football? Your favorite
Curling.
hobby to get your mind
Curling.
off? Curling?
Yeah.
Have you been a long time curler or did you pick it up?
Not long. I started late in my life, but I love it.
What do you love most about curling?
Oh, man. Well, there's a lot of aspects of curling that are cool. First of all, the strategy is cool. So as a coach, it's really interesting. And then the second aspect is, um, even though it's a team game, the pressure of you having to make your shots as the games get bigger and as they get later in the game and stuff like that is, it can exert something in you, emotions you can feel, and still at my age still be competitive. You know what I mean? So yeah, so it gives me definitely competitive juice that I wouldn't get. Plus, it's super social.
And in terms of curling, did you start watching curling to get into it, or what made you get into curling?
I think like most guys, there was a girl involved that got me into it, and so she was into it, so I got into it. That's probably how. But then I loved it. It's just, and then I had a buddy who I played hockey with, whose sister was a competitive curler, and he was looking to get out of hockey kind of at the same time I was, and to try curling. And so we just went together, and we've played together for many years since.
If there was one major championship event of any North American pro sports league that you could go to if money wasn't a thing, which would it be and why?
I would probably go to the Masters. I mean, simply because I think the experience of seeing, you know, um, that course and that terrain, would be unique. Otherwise, I would probably rather watch them on TV. To be honest, like I don't need to be at, if you go to a football game, for instance, it's painful to sit for those commercial breaks on your hands waiting for the next snap to happen. You know what I mean? Like it's not as riveting as people make. Yeah, you're in the crowd and it's loud and stuff. Like I was at the World Junior Final when it was here, and that was loud and crazy and fun. You know, but I've had those experiences, and nothing about that is, so mind blowing. Like, oh, I have to be at that. So, the Masters is something that, if I wanted to go to a Super Bowl, I probably could. The Masters, I'd have to get lucky.
And in terms of like curling, would you ever go to an Olympic curling event, or would that be something that you think would be a bucket list thing for you to do, to watch a major curling championship?
No, I mean, I've been to Grand Slams, so that tomato, I guess, like the Olympics is the Olympics, of course, but curling is hard to watch in an arena, like you just go for the atmosphere, and, it's nice to go to the rink, just like it's nice to go to anything and be outside and watch the game. But, like I go to IG Field and watch a game, and, almost imperatively I'm too low, and like in the old days, in the old stadium, we used to go sit in the upper deck. It was high. Now, I always almost get tickets in the end zone or something, if they're free, and you're super low, you can't see anything. Well, that's not that great. So yeah.
And last question, if there is any advice that you could give to your younger self when you first started coaching, what would it be and why?
Well, I think if I was going to be pot committed to being a professional coach, which I wasn't. I mean, I was in business, so it's a tough question to answer now. I probably would have tried to go down south and be a GA when I was younger. I think basically get a master's in coaching is what I would have tried to do, which is what that is, right? As opposed to, I may have been able to fast track some of the some of the learning curve that I had as a younger coach, and maybe was and just expose myself to that down there would have been probably the route I would have gone. But hindsight's 2020. I mean, I didn't know, nor did I plan that I would be here at this time.
Well, Coach, are there any last things that you want to mention, or any advice that you want to give out to all the young aspiring football players out there who may want to get into coaching?
I will just say, if you want to coach now, Generation Zers, I'll talk about now. It's extremely meticulous, and you need to you're going to need to change the way you think, the way you consume. But the good thing is you're more equipped to deal with the players, say, coming up today than maybe I am. But maybe you're a little less equipped for the grind that's going to come with it. So it's not all glamour. There's a lot of grinding. So you have to love it. If you don't love it, don't do it.
Well, thanks for your time today, Coach, on today's episode. And we really appreciate everything that you've had to offer, and all the stories related to the origins of your time with the Bisons, and a little more in-depth details as to what really goes on with running a university football program, and maybe some of the more grindy things that coaches have to do rather than the glamour of winning a Vanier Cup, and in truth, how really hard it is to win football games.
Yeah, you bet. It's my pleasure. And anytime you want to talk about anything, you let me know. I'll come back on.
All right. Sounds good, Coach. Well, thank you again for all your time today, and thank you for huddling up.